Hello, welcome to Bryant Fitness Systems, and this video is all about the nasty party, the Conservatives. Now today they're trying to pass another new law out of the 149 laws they pass every year that half of us don't even know what laws they're passing, and this one is about the homeless. Now I see homeless wherever I live, where I live in London. And I do feel for some of them that some of them can be really aggressive, or if you give them money, they don't even say thank you. So you just think, why am I going to help this person when they can't even have the courtesy to say thank you? So what the Conservatives are trying to pass today is that if a homeless person is caught on the street, they can be arrested, they can be fined, and if they don't pay the fine, they go to prison. Now, if you're homeless, you haven't got any money anyway. That's why you're homeless. So the Conservatives have been in power for over 14 years, and the Conservatives always said we're going to build more houses, more homes. But we're not building more homes for our own people. We're building more homes for illegal immigrants that shouldn't even be here in the first place. Now, I understand if you're coming from a war-torn country and you need housing, you need home, then I feel for you. But many of them are playing the game. They're coming through France and all the other countries to stay here because they know we're soft and we're giving them money, we're giving them cards, we're giving them phones, and they're getting 5-star service in the hotels, or that's what the media is portraying. But it's costing us billions every day in which to keep these people in housing. But the thing that really winds me up, to keep one person in prison for 1 year costs the taxpayer £49,000. Now, if you've got a homeless person that needs help, why don't you allocate that £49,000 into giving them rented accommodation? Not putting them in a hostel where it's full of druggies and people with mental disorders, which a normal person can't handle that. Does that make sense? If they're not used to being around people that are mentally ill, does that make sense? So I can't believe the nasty party, the Conservatives, are now having a pop at the homeless people. Now, it is a pain to have a guy asking for money when you're trying to get your money out of the cash point. If they do it nicely, then I haven't got a problem with it. But a friend of mine, he told me in Westminster or round Leicester Square, the beggars used to travel into London in normal clothes, have a set of clothes that were muddy and dirty and stick their hands in the mud, put it on their face and stuff, and sit underneath the cash points begging for money. And how he knew this is that they used to tie their clothes up in the bushes in a carrier bag, and he found them and threw them away because he thought, you're taking the piss, you know what I mean? So there is a percentage that are ruining it, like claiming benefits. There's always a percentage that is ruining it for other people. Does that make sense? But I believe that this law shouldn't be passed, because if you're homeless, you get arrested, you're doing the best that you can to get an income by begging on the street, and people do give money to people on the street. Because they feel either sorry for them or they're a religious person and they want to tithe, as in give the money out to get money back, and that type of scenario. And there's lots of heavy druggies. Where I live, there's a team of them that beg at certain times of the day when, Tesco's or Sainsbury's is at the busiest and they're asking for money. Now, I see that really as they're running a business, really. Do you know what I mean? But then I heard that to get a hit of heroin is £1. So all they need to do is get £1 off one person, and that's their hit of heroin for that day. But now they've got fentanyl in the heroin and the cannabis. So these guys will start dying left, right and centre, because the fentanyl in America, if you Google it or YouTube it, you'll see them all comatose, then trying it once and then dying because it's so strong. So So I don't get the idea of that if you're homeless, you have to pay for your board and have to pay for your food out of your benefits. If you're getting benefits, if you don't have an address. So I don't know if you can still get benefits if you don't have an address, and you're really in a fucking difficult position, aren't you? If one, if you don't have an address, and two, if you're not getting any benefits, and the only thing that you can do is beg. Now, I believe that everybody can live off of benefits only if you don't have a drink habit, a smoking habit, you don't want to go out, you don't want to go on holiday, you don't want to buy nice things, you just want to comatose in front of the TV, if you can afford a TV. This is the only way anybody can survive on benefits. Does that make sense? Because the money that they give you is not enough to cover everything. You can't go on holiday anyway because you need to be available for work. So I feel for anybody that's on benefits. I feel for anyone that's homeless. I really do. And I know I've been homeless in my early 20s, and I was fortunate enough to get a flat in the end because I pushed myself and didn't let the system screw me type thing. But I've got family members that are sofa surfing because they've got nowhere to, a permanent base to live. And that's all kids from that were born in the mid to late 90s can't find housing or sofa surfing because there's not available properties. And unfortunately, the Conservatives and the council are only building houses for the rich to buy. The percentage for council tenants is so low, that's why there's such a huge waiting list. Does that make sense? And the thing that makes me think as well, they keep talking about all these councils going bankrupt, but all these councils are getting council tax off of everybody and getting rent off of everybody. Does that make sense? So in Wandsworth, if there's 20,000, if there's like 100,000 properties and everyone's paying rent, they're getting over £100,000 revenue into the council. Does that make sense? And even now, if you're a council tenant, you need to buy your own toilet seat. If your windows break, you need to replace them yourself. Where I live, they've never replaced the UVPC windows for over 20 years. So they got gaps in, you got, sealed units which are broken, which are letting condensation in and stuff like that. But when it comes to the Conservatives and you next vote and you're very rich and wealthy, just think, the more they make it harder for the poor, the more your Range Rover is going to get nicked. The more they make it harder for the poor, the more you're going to get mugged for your Rolex. The more they make it harder for the poor, the more somebody's going to pull a knife out on you to have what you've got. Does that make sense? So really, there's no benefit in making it harder and harder for people that are not well off. By making it harder and harder for people that are not well off or people that are poor, we're going to go back to the workhouse days, which in some respects we're a little bit like that now with, 0 hours contracts. If you're a man and you've got a family, or you're a woman, you've got a family, and you're on minimum wage, you can't do 0 hour contracts. And if you do 0 hour contracts, you're stupid because you'll end up in debt trying to pay all your bills and your outgoings. So I really hope the Conservatives get kicked out and never get back in power again. Because remember, when they changed all the benefit system, Ian Duncan Smith murdered over 30,000 people, committed suicide because they could see no way out when they were changing all the benefit system, making it even harder for normal British people and other people that have come into the country that are claiming benefits. So because of these 30,000 people that died, it was never in the media. It was all hidden. And now they've changed the system. 0.7% of people are playing the system. 0.7%. It is so low, it is unbelievable. And to be able to dodge or take the piss out of the system is really difficult, because all the departments all talk to each other now. Does that make sense? So if you're self-employed, like I am, if I'm self-employed and you're claiming benefits, which if you're on low income, you're allowed to, that's in the rules. But if you go over a certain amount, you need to declare. Does that make sense? But because of the benefit system for a British person, you have to show your passport, you have to show your bank account details, you have to show so much stuff, it's unbelievable. And this is why I don't believe that many people are screwing the system. And a friend of mine went to a meeting with all these people. They got called in for this job search type bollocks. And there was about 40 people there. And they were talking to them people like they were pieces of shit. And going, you need to take any job. Well, you can't take any job unless you're offered the job. Does that make sense? And then they started taking pictures of people without even asking for their consent to put in their magazine to say how fucking good they were. But from what I can gather, only 3% of the people that do any of them courses get a job. 3%. That's disgusting. Now, I said to my friend, why don't they give somebody funding to get a driving licence, or funding to do a certain course, or funding to build a self-employed business? There is zero funding. So when people end up on that system, you can't get off of it because there's no help. Does that make sense? There's no help. There's bullying help, but no real help. So a friend of mine was telling me that when they was on it, they was ringing them twice a week and had to go in twice a week for jobs that wasn't there. And there was no help. And they made empty promises about different things that they were going to do, and they didn't do any of it. They just harassed the person and made them sicker and sicker and sicker through the constant harassment and bullying. So I don't understand. We've got all this wealth and all this money in the UK. Yeah, we're one of the richest nations in the world. But yet we've got homeless people. They're saying that the jobless rate has gone up again. But then the Conservatives say it's going down, because what they do is, this is how they scam it. They get people to do one of the job centre training courses, which an MP in the Houses of Commons has set up this training course so she can get money off the government that goes in her own pocket. Okay, does that make sense? In which to get people on these courses, which says only 3% get a job at the end of it. 3%. Shouldn't that be closed down and a new way set up? Does that make sense? So the way I look at it, the Conservatives and lots of these politicians are always having a go at the homeless, always having a go at the poor, or always having a go at people on benefits. But if you're chronically sick or you're chronically depressed, then they force you into work and you end up losing your temper and smashing somebody with something. Okay, this happened at a hotel that I used to work at. There was two chefs, and they were both foreign chefs. They weren't British, and they wasn't on the register or anything, but they were working, and they wasn't mentally stable. And this chef stabbed two people. Then he disappeared and went out of the country. Can you see how pushing people into things that they don't want to do is not good neither? Does that make sense? So I believe that if the Conservatives get kicked out and another party gets in that's much better, not Labour, because Labour's going to be completely the same, where they say, right, if you're homeless, here's this amount of funding to get you somewhere to live. And if that person turns that down, which that does happen, because a friend of mine said he helped a homeless person once, got him a load of furniture, helped him to move into his place, and within 6 months he was back on the street again because he couldn't handle paying the bills and, you know, living normally. Does that make sense? But the great thing about paying bills and that now, because I pay all my own bills myself, you can do everything by direct debit. So it's really easy. You just spit out the direct debit, know it's going to come out on your date when you get paid from work or whatever you're getting, that it comes out, and every bill is always paid so you never get behind. Does that make sense? So I believe that the government should be more compassionate. But saying that, when you go down Oxford Circus or Charing Cross, there's thousands of homeless people in that area. Yeah, it does smell a bit, but that's London. If you go to France, France smells a bit. You know, it smells of piss and stuff. But since they put the piss areas for men, where you can go and piss now, in Leicester Square and around that area, it doesn't smell as much as it used to, and they clean it on a regular basis. But a homeless issue is because there's not enough housing. Then the other thing is that a lot of the homeless guys are quite clever. They find out through their friend that if they're homeless in Westminster, they have to be housed in Westminster. But because there's such a fucking waiting list, they're looking at 10 years of living on the street. Is it really worth that? I don't think it is at all. Does that make sense? So I believe the Conservatives, a bit like who was in power in the 1940s in Germany, on how they're trying to treat people that are on a lower wage or people that are finding it tough. You know, there should be more help. You know, even myself, I'm looking for other ways to make things cheaper. So I went to the butcher's the other day. If you buy 4 chicken legs, it's £9. But you can go to Whole Foods and buy a whole chicken for £12. Does that make sense? So you get much more amount of meat, more meals out of that. So this is how you can economise. And this is one thing that many people either can't do or won't do, is learn how to economise with their money. And this is what's really important. The same as if you go on Amazon and you buy 4 litres of washing up liquid, it works out cheaper than buying it from Sainsbury's. Or if you buy a kilo container of coconut oil like I do, that's going to last me 4 or 5 months. Instead of buying a 500 ml jar that runs out within a month. Does that make sense? So I think that if these sort of things were taught and people had more respect for the homeless, but some homeless don't help themselves when they're being really aggressive, asking for money aggressively. But if you're on a heroin come down, you're going to be aggressive because you need money. Does that make sense? So I'm not advocating it, and I'm not saying giving them an excuse. But if you've got a drug problem and it's heroin, they get flu-like symptoms. They feel really shit. So they want to do anything they can to get high. And then the other way you got to look at it as well is that if you're homeless, how are you going to keep yourself going when you know you've got to pay money to where you're going to stay, where there's loads of nutters and other druggies, and you've got to pay for your food, and you're living on the street in the freezing cold, the rain, the snow, and all the bad weather, and then you're worried every night when you're asleep whether you're going to get stabbed or your stuff's going to get stolen. So let that rest in your mind. So if you're not sleeping rough and you've got your own place like I have, just think how lucky you are and just be really grateful that you're not in that position. And any of us can end up in that position at any time. So remember that. Thanks very much. Peace and love. And please comment down below. Thank you. Bye.